Hello everybody. Well, I'm here in my garden and I've got my copy of Ghosts and Ghoumas, and you can tell it's my copy because it's got rather a lot of parrot chomps along the bottom. So I thought, to appease my beloved bird friends, we've got magpies sitting around, a chicken has just turned up, and we have a few parrots sitting around us. And we thought we'd do a reading, which I hope that you will enjoy. And it's of the first chapter of my book, Ghosts and Ghoumas. And the first chapter is called Let the Current Take You. One of the best lessons I ever learnt was at the top of a 44-meter bungee tower, stomach churning as I waited for the person in front of me to jump. She had already been counted down from 5 to 1 and hadn't moved, and after a second countdown was still standing, quaking at the top. I felt wrung out with anxiety watching every tortured countdown, and I swore then that I would jump first time. There was no way I would need a second go or a third, which is what she'd needed before she'd finally jumped. If you've got something shitty to do, whatever it is, do not falter. Get it over and done with. There is far less stress in life when you do. And that's why I was walking boldly towards the market, even though I felt anxious and totally uncool, clutching my almost new Doc Marten boots that I didn't wear because they pinched my toes. I was a woman on a mission. This is a journey that began over 20 years ago in 1991, when my life, a big old mess until then, cracked open. It began in Goa, India, on the shores of the Arabian Sea, in the already sweaty hours of the early morning, as the sun turned everything amber. It began in the colourful cacophony of early dawn, as I walked up the beach, passing the menfolk taking their early morning shits, bums hanging over the ocean as they clung to the rocks that buttressed the shallow waters of the sea, whilst cows that looked to be cut from card sat chewing their cardboard cud. Even though it was early, the beach was already throbbing with life. The beach sellers were busy, poking and prodding sleeping partygoers that had crashed on the beach somewhere during the night, and looked up, dazed, when a man with yellowed teeth and an apricot turban tried to sell them a piece of juicy watermelon. There were women wearing brightly coloured saris with huge baskets of mirrored sarongs balanced on their heads, and those dodgy men I'd already been warned about, the ear cleaners, who often dropped a tiny stone into someone's ear to entice them to pay to remove it. They wouldn't get anywhere near me. There was no doubt I felt nervous as I entered the Anjuna markets, with its smells of cumin and spice, and the sizzle of samosas and barges cooking in oil, the smell of cow shit and pigs and sweet chai, bubbling endlessly and everywhere, on single gas burners and mud earth stoves. The market was a feast of colour, lurid green saris next to shocking pinks, piles of apricot and mirrored blankets, the apricot robes of a sadhu who had a long grey beard that trailed to his knees. As I walked up the aisle, a couple of bony yet holy cows sat chewing their cud, blocking the flow as people waited to walk reverentially around them, whilst a gypsy seller, wanting me to buy some beads, jabbed me so aggressively in my arm with her finger, she left a small pea-sized bruise. I was looking for somewhere I could sit, and I finally found a tiny patch of free ground between two stalls. On one side, 3 younger women with huge elaborate nose rings, wearing ornately mirrored and embroidered cholly tops, looked down at the ground, giggling shyly whenever I looked their way. They sat bums in the dirt with their tribal wares spread out on sarongs in front of them. I felt so foolish as I placed my Doc Marten boots on the sand in front of me, arranging my hand-drawn for sale sign at their toes. I only had one thing to sell, and all the other stalls were laden with goods. To make matters worse, I had become the centre of attention. Nothing happens in India without an audience, and more often than not, it's men. A group had gathered around me, They stared at my boots and then at me, almost as if they were waiting for my show to begin. Only I didn't have one. This is it, folks. One pair of boots. I felt ridiculous for even thinking I could sell them for a decent price in India. But I had to trust. The feeling to sell them had been so strong. This was not how I'd imagined my first week in India to be. Yet if I wanted to stay, I had to sell something. And the only thing I had left of value beside my boots was my camera. And I was not parting with that. Even though I felt vulnerable and unsure of what was going to happen next. Even though I felt way out of my depth and very much alone, I could feel I was sitting on the pulse of an experience that was too big to ignore or run away from, and everything in my life was whispering softly, "Just let go, just let go, Kai." And as I surrendered to the moment, I had never felt so free. I was so absorbed by the scenes around me, it was hard to focus on what I needed to do, and that was sell my boots. There was a tiny pig rolling in the dirt, playing with a scruffy puppy. A holy man walked past wearing bright saffron robes, his long grey dreadlocks trailing below his bum, his body lithe and muscled. He was carrying a three-pronged trident and a bright red shiny bucket, which made him look as if he was on his way to fight a fire. As the sun rose higher, the tourists began to leak in, some looking as if they'd come straight from one of the dance parties that Goa was famous for, with their faces painted, trailing glitter, and wearing psychedelic bodysuits. A couple of gruff-looking men, black-leathered and testy, with grey, pouchy faces, were parking their hired Enfield motorbikes at the back of someone's stall, while some other tourists haggled over the price of a sarong. My audience had soon dispersed, and apart from the odd glance, most people walked past as if I wasn't there, which didn't exactly reassure me, as I was hoping to make a fast sale. The wafts of curries and other Goan cuisine being cooked in all the ramshackle huts that edged the market was making me ravenous, but I couldn't eat until I'd sold my boots, and no one had shown the slightest interest yet. When I had originally booked my ticket to Delhi, an older man in the travel agency had asked me if I'd ever been to India before. When I replied no, he offered the best advice anyone could have ever given me. "It's like a river," he said. "You just have to throw yourself in and let the current take you." And that's what I was doing, sitting in the sand hoping to sell my lonesome pair of Doc Marten boots. I had thrown myself into the river, but I hadn't expected the current would be so strong. I had been in India less than a week when my bag was stolen. It contained my traveller's checks, a large amount of cash, the opals I'd bought to trade, and every single rupee I had. I was left with nothing except my camera. I had been washing at a well with my bag right beside me, and as I lifted up the bucket to rinse my hair, someone must have slithered in and snatched it. The moment I realized my bag had gone, I went into a panic. I raced around hysterically for half an hour, searching everywhere I'd been, asking everyone if I knew if they'd seen it, even people I didn't know. And the whole time, I had this knowing ache in my gut that told me it had gone. As I collapsed onto the sand, I had no idea what I would do. And for a while, I sat there feeling absolutely stunned. Then I became aware of someone standing near me. I have no idea who. I was totally submerged within myself. As they spoke, I listened. "You must feel terrible losing everything." And something within me began to change. I thought about their words for a while, really letting them sink in. I knew how I was supposed to feel. Most of us divide experiences into good or bad, a common language we all understand. But what I discovered once I got past how I was programmed to react was that I didn't feel terrible at all. In fact, I felt absolutely amazing. I was astonished to discover this. Getting in touch with how I felt instead of how I was expected to feel opened a doorway to one of the most treasured experiences in my life, one that I would not have given up for anything. Yes, adversity can be transformed. What I was to discover was that having all your money stolen in India can be a wonderful experience if you are open to letting go of program responses that simply block the flow of abundance in your life. One thing was certain, I didn't have to worry about my bag anymore. The stories I'd been told about how some Indians parted travelers from their cash included sending monkeys in to steal while you slept, drugging food to knock you out, then taking everything as you lay unconscious, and putting bamboo poles with pads soaked in ether through your window as you slept to etherize you, then breaking in and taking everything. Stealing in India was a fine art, and I had begun to feel so paranoid, as if I was dealing with a corrupt Spider-Man who had all these magical abilities he could use to relieve me of my cash. I would not have been at all surprised to be told they could slither through bars on a window and manifest like a freaky apparition inside. Every moment, every second of every day so far had been heavily laced with the fear of being parted from my bag. Well, it was over. The deed had been done, and I felt utterly and deliriously free. I could have travelled by bus or bike the 40 kilometres to the nearest phone and put one of my loved ones into a panic as they tried to stretch funds I knew they didn't have to help me. Or I could have spent 2 days travelling to Bombay to get my traveller's checks replaced. But I didn't feel I wanted to do that. I only had a couple of $100 in checks anyway. The rest was in cash. For sure that money would have helped, but I found myself feeling so deeply immersed in the moment, nothing existed outside the reality I was in, and in that space, for the first time in my life, there was absolutely no fear. I sat on the warm sand at the market, trying to ignore the endless streams of nomads all touting their wares, trying to separate me from cash I no longer had. I could feel the innocence of the sun on my face, the smell of chai and spice and sweaty bodies basking on the beach, and I felt infused with a knowing that I was looked after. In the next moment, holding up my boots was a smartly dressed Indian woman, calling excitedly to her husband and kids. For many Indian people, West was always best. I had experienced this several times already in only a week. The first time was when I'd gone to buy some Ayurvedic soap and toothpaste. The shopkeeper had been mortified that I didn't want Lux or Colgate. He had tried rather emphatically to dissuade me from my choice, and much to his distress, without success. As I'd paid for my purchases, he had looked at me with such pity, unable to equate my choice with that of a rational human being. It was the same with my Doc Marten boots. They were from the West and therefore revered like the Holy Grail. Hubby eagerly pulled out his wallet and with barely a haggle freed me of my market stall. I was elated as I headed off to find something delicious to eat. I had done it. I'd braved my insecurities, sat feeling foolish and trite and lonely for hours on end, but I had damn well done it. I'd sold my boots. Nothing about my trip was turning out like I'd hoped. I had expected to be immersing myself in the sacred chants and sanctuary of an ashram, and instead I had landed right in the midst of the Goan party scene. And even though I didn't like parties and always tried to avoid crowds, everything in my life felt perfect, even losing all my money. I was exactly where I was meant to be, and I knew that because I felt full of love. Selling my boots had been my initiation on the miraculous path of living a life of trust. I thought it was all about love, all innocent and balmy like a meadow of flowers swaying in the breeze, and I had no idea then that my journey ahead would take me straight into the depths of darkness, from which I would return with jewels so bright they would be a guiding light in all my years to come. And that, my friends, and my dear parrots, is the first chapter of Ghosts and Ghoumas by Kai Crow that is available to buy from our website, www.ghostsandghoumas.com. And if you've read it and loved it, please let your friends know. Thanks, everybody, and hope you enjoyed our little reading in the Garden of Love and Old Bones, which is the fourth book in this series. This is only book one, everyone. And this is the garden that we live in. Much love, and have a wonderful day. And hey, let the current take you. It's the best way.